forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Grander earth has quaked before, moved by the sound of his voice, and seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken from my regard. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And it is well with me. And far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. is well. It is well. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. The waves and wind still know His name. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. 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 It is well. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well with me. Will you pray with me? God, through it all, through every moment, every challenge, every emotion, it is well. We can always take comfort in your love and in your presence. May we bring that into our weeks, into our days, that feeling, that resounding, it is well. Amen.
Love, the greatest of all the commandments. This is what our world so desperately needs. In a world often marred by division and strife, it's crucial to remember that love is not just an emotion. It's the very essence of our faith. We need an infusion of Christ's love into our lives. As followers of Christ, we are called to love one another unconditionally, just as our Savior loves us. God's heart is true and tender. His love knows no bounds. Jesus loved the sick, the liars, the poor, and the betrayers. Let us make our love like His, knowing no bounds. Love is not restricted based on income or race, addiction, or life choices. It has the power to heal wounds, bridge divides, and mend broken hearts. Love is patient, love is kind, and love never fails. In this world where chaos may reign, let love be our guiding light, our source of strength, and our legacy as believers. For in love, we find the power to change the world.
Well, good morning. My name is Michael Scott, and I want to thank you for being here with us today, here at our on-site or online. I know a lot of you watch during the week and on Sunday mornings, and so thank you for being a part of this. Today, we are kicking off a new series called Love is Blind. Now, I want you to think of a time in your life when somebody looked at you or told you in some way that they loved you. I want you to picture that in your head right now. Think of that time in your life where somebody who was significant in your life and it made you feel a certain way. I want you to go to that feeling. You got it? I'm going to talk about one of the most significant times in my life where somebody said, I love you. Now, there's so many, and over the next several weeks, I'll be sharing several of these stories. I actually want to hear many of your stories, so if you have some that you want to share, please send them to me. But one of the most significant times in my life when somebody said, I love you, was about 23 years ago. So 23 years ago, my daughter Angelica was a baby, right? And she's growing up, and she's getting to that point where she's crawling and then walking, and along with all that, they stick a lot of things in their mouth, right? Like everything they shouldn't, but they also, a lot of words begin to come out. Now, her first words weren't I love you, or even daddy for that matter. But I can remember back when her and we used to live over in Independence in a fourplex. And I was a single dad at the time. And so we're living there. And my oldest, she loved Roly-Poly-Oly. So any Roly-Poly-Oly fans in the room? I got one over here maybe. Okay, Roly-Poly-Oly. Now, 23 years ago, DVDs were coming out, but they weren't really a thing, so it was on VHS. And so we're in my living room with our CRT TV, right? We didn't have flat panels back then. And watching a VHS tape of Roly-Poly-Oly. Right? Now, I also wrote this down, so I remember it. But we're sitting in our living room, and it's just her and I. And I'm a bachelor, right? I'm not married. It's just her and I. So we're eating in the living room. It's dinner time, right? And we had, those little things that sit in. It's like a high chair that sits in a seat. Right? Well, I had stuck that to our couch. And so she had a little tray in front of her, right? And I had a little tray, and we were just eating some food, watching Roly-Poly-Oly. And we're sitting there, and we're watching it, and for some reason, she just loved that show so much. And I'm sitting there, and we're finishing up dinner, and she's, right next to me in her little chair and her little tray. And she reaches up, and there's been words coming out like mama and dada, and she just kind of snuggles in, and I heard, love you. Anybody have that? Anybody ever experienced that? That was the first time that my own flesh and blood had told me that they loved me. Now that will forever be imprinted into my heart, into my soul, and into my spirit. And it wasn't just because she said the words. I mean, there that night, I'm sitting there on the couch, and I felt something. It wasn't just words that said that she loved me. I felt it, the touch, the embrace, the kindness, the warmth. Something in her soul was reaching out to something in my soul. And for a brief moment, our souls connected. And they connected in such a way, and the way we express this is that she loved me and I loved her. Having kids will change you. Having people who love you will change you. Of course, now I have 4 kids, and I'm not sure any of them say it anymore. I'm just kidding. They all say it to me every single day. But you get to this point in life where you start to remember and to think back and to really cherish those memories. Now, she didn't really have language at the time. She didn't really know why she loved me, right? She was feeling something. You see, love, she had heard the words from mom and dad. Love was a concept for her. So for her, love, she didn't know what it was, but she felt it first, and then the words came out of her mouth. I think love is this amazing thing that is blind. We can't see it. We can't touch it. We can barely describe it, right? And then we have all this language, all these words in which we describe this thing that is going on inside of us. And it expresses itself in many different forms. For me, the best way to describe God, and my favorite Bible verse, is the simple verse that says that God is love. So the thing in which we are describing, those experiences we have with each other, with our kids, with our significant others, with our friends, with our partners, it's love. And it manifests and it expressed in so many different ways. This series, we're going to focus on this phrase that love is blind. Because I believe love is the thing that you can't quite see or touch or taste or feel, but you can describe it, right? How many of you have ever loved somebody or still love somebody that's no longer here? Now, maybe they've passed on, maybe they're not in your life anymore. How many of you, like my dad just passed away just a few months ago, right? 2 months ago, my dad passed. I still love my dad. He's no longer here, right? So I'm blind to my father. Now, my physical being of my father, I am blind to that. I can no longer see him in whatever form he exists in now, right? He has gone beyond to the next part of life. So that part of me is blinded to me, but I still love him. So I think in that fact, in that manner, love is blind. But love also has this amazing ability to blind us. And often in good ways, sometimes in bad ways. We've all been in love before, right? Like, don't raise your hands because there's spouses in the room, but how many of you have been in love, right? Like, we're going to talk about that next week, actually. We'll talk about being in love and what that means and what that looks like. But love has so many different facets to it. So many different angles, so many different ways in which we can express and experience that love. And I want to dig into some of those. What do those mean for our life? Why is, or why should be, or why will love continue to be blind or blind us in our lives? And for me, it's because the greatest thing that is love, greatest things are always things we can't touch or see. We have to experience them. There's something inside of us. There's something that wells within us. And when that happens, we're accessing our soul and our spirit. And that happens in community, and it happens with God and with other people. This is why the greatest commandment is to love God and then to love others as we're also somehow in the midst of that loving ourselves. And so for these reasons, I believe that love is blind. But I think we struggle to do it. I mean, when we love people, sometimes that's hard for us. Now, the reason why love being blind is good is because real love doesn't see a person, right? But our brains and our material self, right? So when we see another person, we're seeing their atoms, their self. We often talk about people as their physical bodies. Now, I believe that we are both physical and spiritual, right? We are two things within one. And that within each of us is this thing called a spirit, and that God is this thing that we're inexplicably connected to. That's our spirit. But within us is two different things. But we look at a person, we don't see their spirit, right? It's the spirit, love, all these things are the unknown. It's the unseen. What we see is a person's physicality. We see the atoms that make up who they are. And the atoms that make up who we are, we have descriptors for those, right? We have male, we have female, we have white, we have black, we have brown, right? And then we have further descriptors. Well, there's also a different part of me. I'm attracted to this, and then we describe ourselves as that way. There's so many ways in which we can describe our physicality. And for some reasons, our brains are programmed to see that. That's how we identify stuff. Originally, our brains were programmed to identify stuff like that because we would say, ooh, lion, bad, right? Or, ooh, bear, bad, and we would run. And so our brain is incapable of not looking at something and then passing some kind of judgment on it, analyzing it, and then saying that this is a certain thing. Our culture right now is struggling with this, with identifiers. What are our identifiers? How do we describe? How do we identify somebody else? Right? These are topics that we talk about all of the time. And because of this, our brains are incapable then of not passing judgment. So our physical bodies will look at somebody, and I don't mean judgment in a bad sense. Judgment just means you're looking at somebody and saying it's this, this, and this, right? That's what we're doing, right? Jamie is wearing I think it's a black shirt, right? That's a judgment. I'm not judging her, saying she's a bad person. I'm determining that she's wearing a black shirt, right? These are the things that our brain does. And so when we see a person, we will look at them, and no matter what we do or how hard we try, we're always going to see their physicality. And then we're going to look at them, and then it's unfortunate, but we're always going to pass some kind of judgment. That's what our physical bodies do. It doesn't make us bad. It makes us flawed sometimes. But that's what we do. That's how the brain works. It goes through, we see stuff through our eyes, and our brain's programmed a certain way, and we see things, and we pass judgment, and we look at things a certain way. What love has this ability to do is love has this amazing ability to change the way that we are programmed. Because even the best of us that try to say we don't see race or color or sexuality or male or female, like even the best people, it's incapable. You can't not see it. Now you can change the way you react to it. But for me, it's not just about changing the way you react to it. It's that we want to truly see people for their spirit. We want to see through the physicality. We want to see what's going on inside. We want to not just see, but know that they come from the same thing that I come from. And that is goodness, and that is God, that we are all made up of the same stuff in our spirits. And so the fact that love is blind is that love has this ability to help us to see through each of us, to see a person at their core. And it's only love that does that. No amount of education, no amount of intelligence, no amount of language can cause you to do that. It's only when our spirits unite and come together in relationship, in community, in conversation, next to each other, often around a table, can we truly see somebody for who they are. And what I believe is the ability to love them. Now, I think our culture is obsessed with this. This is why we have shows like The Voice. Any Voice fans in here? Now, why do we have a show like The Voice? They want to hear the person before they see them. Why? Right? Because they don't want to judge the person based on how they look. What's the other one? What's the one they wear all the outfits and costumes? Masked Singer? Same premise, right? Now, I don't watch this show. I watched a few clips, and if you subscribe to our app, you'll see there's many videos in our app this week that will link you to some of this. So download that, watch those when you're talking in your homes and around your family. But one of the videos is from a TV show called, the same as the series, Love is Blind. And so I at least know the premise, okay? You go, and they put you in rooms. I think it's a Netflix special, right? Anybody watch this? Anybody watch Love is Blind? Good, because so you're just as ignorant as I. Oh, one person. Okay, well, good. Don't call me out if I mess it up, okay? Okay, so They go in like these pods. Here, I'm going to look at you, April. They go in these pods, right? And they don't know each other, and they have conversations completely blind to each other. And then I think at the end they get married, which is dumb. But the premise, it's a good premise. It's a good premise. They try to get to know each other and be friends before they get romantically involved. That's a very good premise. How long's the time frame, April? You watch it. 45-minute dates, speed dating. Okay, well, I guess not speed dating, it's probably like 5 minutes. But, so, like, that's the premise to the show. And I think we're kind of obsessed with, we like the idea of not judging people, not seeing who they are on the outside. But I feel like we really struggle with digging deep and truly finding and peeling back all the layers, right? People are like onions. Isn't that what Donkey said to Shrek? People are like onions. You got to peel back all those layers to really see what's going on. And if we approach something from a physical standpoint, right, the way our brains are going to tell us to do it, we're going to pass judgment in a way that we don't even mean to half the time. Now, sometimes some people do. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. What I'm saying is I'll give people the benefit of the doubt sometimes. But when we can sit down and have a conversation and truly see the heart of somebody and get to what makes them tick and understand them, when we can truly love them, then it blinds us to all the other stuff. We're able to love one soul to another. Now, my greatest story about loving another that I've never seen, right? So I love grandparents that have passed, my father, my wife's father, my father-in-law, a lot of people that I love that are no longer here. I want to share an experience when my wife was pregnant with our youngest daughter, Kira. Now, one, you should know, super jealous. Super jealous that women, April, I'm sorry, I'm calling you out. April's pregnant, getting ready to have a baby soon, right? And we're all excited about it. And so, spoiler alert, I'm super jealous of that fact, right? Now, I'm not jealous of the fact that, of the labor part and the pains and all that, but I'm jealous of the fact that you get to carry another life inside of you. And I'm going to tell you why. Because with all the kids, like my wife and I would be laying in bed, and one night she's pregnant with Kira, and you do the thing where they're like, hey, come feel this, right? It's moving inside of me. I'm like, that must be so cool. Like, I'm jealous of that. I think it's a really cool thing. And so, of course, as dads, we go over, and I'm laying next to her, right? She's like, feel it here, and I feel it here, and all this. And I don't know about you, but my kids have heard my voice, read to them, sing to them, and talk to them since they were in the womb. It's weird and it's awkward, but we would talk to her, right? And we would call her by name, and we would read stories, and we would do all these things. And so I'm talking to her one night, right? Which is just a big torpedo belly. But anyway, I'm having conversations with my daughter, Kira, and I can't even see her yet, right? And so I'm laying on my wife's stomach, and this is what I do, right? Talking, and then all of a sudden I get this big kick in my head, right? And I'm like, oh, so that's how it's going to be, right? So I punched her back, and no, it's not true. I mean, that's a joke. But I loved that little girl from the moment she was in my wife's womb, right? Without even seeing her. And I believe with all my heart that each one of my kids, we were connected in a spiritual way before I even met them. And I hear moms talk about this all the time. Like when they're carrying the baby and they just feel this connection, they know how they're going to be, and they just know the name, like all those things. I believe that's the purest form of love, when you can love somebody and you haven't even met them. The Bible has a lot to say about love, and we'll dig into many aspects. The overarching theme for this, and you heard it in the video when we started out, the overarching theme is 1 Corinthians 13. Now, I want to preface with what is the book of Corinthians. There's several books of Corinthians. Now, as people, we took letters, right? There's this guy named Saul who changed his name to Paul, and he traveled around to different groups and places. And when he traveled around, he had this really great ability to gather people around him. And they get together, and he's like, hey, did you hear about this guy? His name was Jesus, and he literally transformed, was a part of the process of transforming the early church. And so he'd go to places, and he went to this town called Corinth. And he was there, he gathered his friends, and he had apprentices and people that followed him and people that worked together with him. And when he would leave, the people often struggled, right? As groups of people do. Anytime you get a group of people together, you're going to find that there's going to be struggles that come up within those groups of people. And so from time to time, they would write him letters, and Paul would write letters back. And so the first time that he writes these people, and they're struggling, and then they're struggling to love one another. And so Paul sits down, and Paul was a beautiful writer, and he sits down and he pens this letter to the people of Corinth, and he simply talks to them, and it's like, listen, love is really important. And so I want you to think about this. If you've ever sat down with somebody and they were struggling maybe with a romantic relationship or a relationship with their kids or maybe with the boss, and ultimately it comes down to when we struggle in relationships, it's because we aren't loving the other person. Now, sometimes they aren't allowing us to love them. Sometimes, I'm not saying it's your fault, but I am saying love is the issue, right? We're not connecting in a deep way, in a meaningful way that we need to. And so I want you to think, if you ever sat down with a person and had that conversation, what did that conversation look like and how did it go? We're going to read Paul's idea of when somebody is struggling with love, what should love look like? So what does love look like? What does it not look like? And then what does it produce? So as humans, Paul wasn't writing chapters because Paul wasn't writing a book, right? Paul was writing letters to his friends. And so, but as humans, we like to divide it up in chapters. And if you're a fan of going home and reading your Bibles later, which I know all of you do every single day, twice a day, I'm reading from Corinthians 13, okay? So this is what Paul says. He said, if I speak in tongues of human beings and of angels, but I don't have love, I am a clanging gong or a clashing cymbal, right? So he starts out strong. Listen, I can be the loudest thing in the world. I can speak in the tongues of angels or know all the languages on earth. But if I don't have love, it means nothing. I'm like a rattling cymbal, right? I should have kept Keith up here and had him do a little cymbal hat. All right. If I have the gift of prophecy and I know all the mysteries and everything else, and if I have such complete faith that I cannot move mountains, but I don't have love, I'm nothing. If I give away everything that I have and hand my body over to feel good about it, what have I done? About what I've done, but I don't have love, I've received no benefit whatsoever. Right? In their day and age, speaking in tongues or speaking multiple languages or the language, these are popular things, right? Speaking in prophecy, right? Predicting what was going to happen. We don't talk about that much now because we don't use that word prophet much anymore. But really, a meteorologist, prophet. Right? Historian, prophet, right? They can look at patterns and they can look at things, and we have all these computers and algorithms that can predict now. And so we don't use that word prophecy much anymore, but it was a lot harder in their day. So if you had this ability to read and were educated, which first of all was a very rare person that you were educated and could read, but if you could do that and know the history, and there were gurus and soothsayers and priests and stuff that understood and knew weather patterns. Like, you were a prophet. You understood these things. And those are very well-respected people. And the language in the Old Testament was that they were chosen by God, right? They were lifted up. They were often leaders. Often you had kings and prophets. And so I'm trying to give you a picture of the thing that they held most important. If you could speak multiple languages, if you were educated, if you could predict things, those are the most important people in their culture. Paul's saying all of those things are meaningless. Now, Paul probably would have been aware of the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is my favorite book of the Bible. Ecclesiastes says very similar language. You can have all of it. You can have all the things, all the riches, all the wealth, all the things of the world, and it's meaningless. It's nothing. It's like smoke or it's like mist. Paul is saying that about love. If you can do all these things, give everything you have, be the best that you are at anything, have the most education, it's all meaningless. It's smoke, it's mist, it's nothing. It means absolutely nothing without love. So then he says, that is what I'm getting to. It's not about all these things, right? All those things are attached to our physicality, to our brains, to our knowledge, to our understanding. He's like, love is something else. He's like, if love is something else, if that's the thing that we're pursuing, then he goes on to describe it. He says, love is patient. Love is kind. It isn't jealous. It doesn't brag. It's not arrogant. It isn't rude. It doesn't seek its own advantage. It's not irritable. It doesn't keep a record of complaints. How many of you don't feel very loving right now? I mean, most of us may have done at least 2 or 3 of these this morning. The bad ones, not the good ones, right? It isn't happy with injustice, but it is happy with the truth. It puts up with all things, trusts all things, hopes for all things, and endures all things. Love never fails. As for prophecies, they will be brought to an end. As for tongues, they will stop. As for knowledge, it will be brought to an end. We know in part and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, what is partial will be brought to an end. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, reason like a child, and think like a child. But now that I have become a man, I have put an end to childish things. Now we see a reflection in the mirror, then we will see face to face. Now I know partially, but then I will know completely in the same way that I have been completely known. And now faith, hope, and love remain. And of these 3 things, the greatest of these is love. Now that last bit, that last paragraph is hard to follow sometimes, right? Because Paul goes back to, he talks about prophecies, and he talks about languages, and he talks about knowledge. And he says all of those things will fail. It doesn't mean they won't be true. What he means is they will fail you. They will gain you very little in this life if you can prophesy, and if you can have all the language, and you can speak everything, and you can write books, and you can understand the mysteries of the universe. It means nothing. He says all of those things will end. But then he says something else. He's like, remember when you were a child? When you were a child, you thought a certain way. And as a child, we see things in a certain light. And it's easy to talk about that in our physicality. And when we grow up, I mean, we have an early childhood education center here, right? We are in the process of raising our children and teaching them how to read and their ABCs and their colors and their numbers. And those are all important things. But the thing that I tell staff is that's a teacher's job to do that. What I care about for our directors and the people that are really involved with these kids is, are we teaching them how to love? Right? So when we're kids, we're so focused, and we're told so much to focus on education and the knowledge and the understanding of things. And when we're children, we have that, but when we grow up, it should be more than just that. We should graduate into something that is greater than ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that we stop learning. Education and knowledge is very important. It grows us, it stretches us, it can challenge us, unless we're only reading the things we agree with, and that's a whole other sermon. We'll talk about that later. But when we grow up and we're an adult, we should see things differently. He talks about how he sees a reflection at some point. He's like, it's like a reflection, but at some point, when we have an understanding, when we can truly love people, when we experience love, it's no longer like a reflection in a mirror. It's like meeting somebody or something face to face. You ever seen the moon in a river or in a body of water, in a lake or something? And it's beautiful, but then you look up and you see the actual moon, and it's even more beautiful. This is what Paul's talking about. The things on our surface, our physical bodies, are a beautiful thing, but if we dig beneath the surface, if we can see not just the reflection, but the actual source of the thing, and the actual source of the thing is not our bodies. The source of who we are is spiritual. And it's this inexplicable link that we have with God. And when we can see that, when we can see that in each other, when we can see that as love, when we can connect with that and experience that with each other, it's life-changing. And it changes us from this over here to something new. And it's not a one-time process. It's not a one-time step. It's not one day we're a child and one day we're an adult. The Bible, Jesus even describes this as a pathway. And here's the interesting thing about this pathway. When I think of a pathway, because Jesus says it's narrow and it's hard to get through that opening or that pathway, and I believe there's truth in that. But that pathway, we describe it as a straight path. Now, my pathway in life has been nothing but curves and turns and going backwards and making U-turns and left turns and right turns. And you know where that path always leads me? It leads me to other people. Our pathways lead us to each other because it's only in relationship, it's only when we're actively loving each other that we find some kind of meaning and purpose. So our path isn't that we're right and everybody else is wrong and we're observing people on the outside and we're better than, right? There's this word righteous that people sometimes use, and there's this word that goes along with it, a descriptor called self-righteous, that for some reason we think we're going to be on some straight and narrow path looking at others as they fall off the wagon and they veer from the path. And my experience is that path goes all over the place. That path is one of love, and it leads me to people, and for a time and a season in other people's lives, we meet, and it's meaningful, and I love them. And then we move on, and we go to the next thing. Now, that's not always true. Some relationships are lifelong. I hope a lot of your relationships are lifelong. Maybe you've heard me say that the single biggest predictor of early death is isolation. That same research, which we'll get into in later weeks, that same research says that the happiest people, the most fulfilled people in life, are ones who have significant relationships. Now, is your blood pressure important? Yes. Like, you need to make sure your health markers are in place. Those things are important. But if you want purpose, if you want meaning, and if you want longevity, so people's relationships, it's not just about purpose, it's also about longevity. People who have solid relationships and meaningful relationships not only have better quality of life, but they outlive other people. Isolation is the worst thing you could ever do to a person. So in times when we feel isolated, when we're not feeling that love, it's because we're feeling disconnected from each other and from God. The love that Paul's inviting us into connects us back together. Because that thing is of God and from God. God doesn't leave us. There's some language in the Old Testament that would lead us to believe that, but I don't think that's how it works. God never leaves us. God is always present. We talk about God this way as omniscient, as everywhere. It fills everything, every being, every ounce of space. And it's us sometimes when we struggle, when we go through very painful things, and usually in pain and grief is when we rescind. Our body, our physical body, our brains do some really messed up stuff, and it thinks it needs to protect us, and often it blocks us off to other people. And it shuts down that pathway of love to each other. It can often make our lives very difficult. The thing about love, though, is that we have to take action in order for others to feel loved. So love is a feeling, love is something we experience, but if my daughter wouldn't have leaned over and said, "I love you," and if my other daughter wouldn't have kicked me in the head, I wouldn't have known, right? There was action tied to that feeling of love that I have, tied to that experience. I met with a friend of mine this week, and my friend is going through a very difficult time, broken relationships. He's a single dad. And, you know, when you go through difficult times, when you've had a relationship with somebody and maybe there's kids involved and maybe there's a job change and maybe there's a financial situation change and all these things, life becomes very difficult and it can feel like you're alone. And the reality of it is, especially when we're talking about loss of relationship, often you are alone. As a single dad sitting in a living room with my daughter watching Roly Poly Oly eating a frozen pizza, it felt lonely sometimes. My friend finds themselves in that situation right now. We were talking and he's like, I don't, right? There was like, I don't understand. I don't know what's happening, right? And with loss of relationship comes all the other stuff, the finances, the property, just all the other stuff, the kids. What do you do with all that? And I could tell there was a massive disconnect. The person that he was invested in, that he was synced to, his partner, right? That's how we describe our significant others, partners. And when you lose a partner, life gets real tough. All of us have lost partners, whether they be romantic or business or, for some of you, crime. These things are very difficult. And we're having a conversation. He says, I just don't know what to do. I find myself at a place and it's affecting him physically and just all the stuff, right? All the stuff you never want to go through at one time, often people go through in loss of relationship. And I said, if money were an object, what would you want? And his answer was really simple. He's like, I want somebody to love me for me. So somebody to love me for who I am. I don't want to be so lonely. I want to be with people. I said, okay, what else? He's like, well, I'm a single dad. He goes, meals are hard. We talked about food. We talked about money. One of the things we do here was we're constantly in a space where I'm challenging you every week, right, to get out and make a difference, to get out and to change somebody's life. We're not here to feel good about ourselves and to go home happy. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. We're here to stretch. Faith should be the thing that takes us to that next level of awareness, that next level of opportunity, that can see through a person's dysfunction. And he's pretty dysfunctional right now, right? Now I have permission to share this story without names, but he's going through a lot, and he would admit that. It's not easy, and it's easy for us to look at a person like that who finds themselves on the fringes of society right now, to look at somebody like that and say, man, you made some bad choices. And if we dug into his life and into his marriage, I'm sure you could actually identify the things that went wrong. And the problem with our human brains is we're really good at that, right? How many of you are good at that? You can look at somebody else and be like, I know what all your problems are. And if you just sit down and listen to me, I could fix them for you in at least 15 minutes. Anybody, do you think that from time to time? Nobody? You guys are liars. We all do that, right? Instead, what if we thought of those hurting people, as those marginalized people, those people who are feeling less than? What if we thought of people and said, you know what? Let's peel a few layers back. Let's go ahead and ask them how they're doing. Let's dig into their life a little bit, and not to the point of we're trying to figure out why they're there. I don't care why they're there. What I care about is how can we make a difference in their life to get them to that next phase and to that next step. One of the things we do, we're actually kicking back off after church today, so here's my challenge. We have a ministry called Delectable, right? So everything, of course, has to have a table name to it. So Delectable is a group of people who get together. Stephanie is leading the first one. Stephanie, raise your hand. You're not reading 11. I'm wrong. Jen's leading the first one. Where's Jen? She's not in here. She's in the kitchen right now. Sorry. Stephanie came up with the name Delectable. I should stick to my notes. This will make my life a lot easier. Stephanie came up with the name Delectable, and Jen's leading the first one. So here's what Delectable is. We get together, and somebody brings in a recipe. Who here likes to eat? Anybody? All right. Finally, some honesty in this room. Okay. So they bring in a recipe, and they say, like, Jen brought in, we're doing chicken Alfredo pesto with tomatoes. I mean, it's just really great little pasta dish, right? And she's going to show us how she makes it. It's her recipe and her family. We make it in mass quantity. We have these little metal tins, and then we take that food, we put it in the tins, and we put little lids on them, we write instructions on them, and we take one home, okay? That's for our family. So we're going to sit around the table. We're going to get our app out, right, that everybody has and uses every week because there's questions that go along with the sermon, and I know all of you do it. And you're going to get those questions out. You're going to watch the videos and ask those questions to your family, okay? That's one of the things we do. The other thing we do with that food is we take a second one home. We don't take it home necessarily. We can leave it here in the freezer. But if you have an idea, and we take it to one of my friends, like my friend who's going through a difficult time. And we take a meal over, and hopefully we're not just giving them a meal, right? There are times for that. There are deep and dark times, but there are also times where it's appropriate to sit down and just share a meal with somebody. April, you're getting ready to have a baby. We're going to bring some food to you. I probably won't stay, okay? It'd be a difficult time. I'll just give you some food. But if you know somebody having a rough time, share a meal with them, right? I always say that the food is the tool. Nobody's starving in America. But what we can use is that tool of food to build relationships. And when we build relationships, and when those are substantial in our lives, they bring us meaning and purpose. And so we have a group of people that get together, and this is what they do. They prepare meals not only for their families, but for those in our community who might need one. So first thing is, if you want to come be a part of that, it's full for the people who are assembling today, but you can come watch and come listen and talk about how the process works. 2, we need funding for stuff like this, right? If you're able to give, I don't ask you all for money a whole lot. I've always been told it's better make the ask, and so I'm asking. It takes money for stuff like this. So right now, they are self-funding, so everybody's bringing their own money. It would be nice if we had a pool of money that somebody could provide that would fund some of these mission things. And the third thing is I want to challenge you to take one of these meals, call us up, send us an email, or make one on your own, and to share one of those meals with somebody you know is struggling this week. Share those stories with me if you can, by the way. I love to hear those stories about how we're making a difference in our community. All right, let's wrap it up. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for the opportunity to love. God, to be able to take what we have and to be able to not just see somebody's problems or their struggle or their physicality, God, but to see through them into their soul. God, to see them as loved just as we are loved. God, help us in that journey. Help us in that path. Help us to see that there are people all along our pathway who need that love. Help us to be the kind of people that meet those needs, that can be blind to their problems, blind to their situation, blind to their skin color or their sexual orientation or their gender. God, to be blind to all of those things, to see them as another creature that you created and that we are created from the same thing. God, help us to see that love is in each of us. Help us to bring it out. Help us to cultivate it. Help us to develop it. Help us to be in love. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Will you stand with us? In the darkness, we were waiting without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. In the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born, then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint. By his blood and in his name, in his freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise
this week, may we be blinded by the love that is inside each one of us. Go in peace. Amen.
Nice work. Good. Well done.
I have not figured out what I want to do with that song and the first song. This is our God.
Yeah, King of Kings is like